a U.S. citizen nor an Indian citizen, but however, I will try my best. I mean, I think that on the eve of this visit by Secretary Kerry to Delhi, it would be a mistake to expect too much from the visit itself. I mean, India-U.S. relations are where we all know they are. A lot of frustration on both sides due to India slowing growth in the past 2 years, due to the difficulties for U.S. business to precisely develop its activities in India, and so on and so forth. And we could mention also some differences over regional affairs as well. So my sense is that this visit is going to be primarily about the resumption of a dialogue which has been stalled for the past 2 years. I mean, a lot of things existed which remain firmly in place. I mean, the strategic dialogue, as several mentioned, there is the economic and trade partnership, there is the security situation, there is energy innovation, there is a regional situation, you name it. And those things have been in place, but this dialogue didn't go very far in the past 2 years. Now, we are under a different period. First of all, as you know, there will be the Prime Minister Modi's visit to the United States at the end of September. That's one thing, and clearly Secretary Kerry will probably work on that quite considerably. The second aspect is India just finished a long period of electoral campaign with the election of a new Prime Minister and a lot of expectation being raised both for India itself and for the resumption of the India-U.S. dialogue. So these are, I think, the issues that will set up the meeting, the preparation of the summit to start with, the resumption of the dialogue, and see perhaps where India will go in the months to go. I mean, one of the first difficulties that we have seen arising in the past few days, if not few hours, is the difficulty in the WTO about the trade facilitation agreement that India refused to sign, which is likely to not impede, but I mean be an additional irritant in the relationship. Clearly, what we see is a relationship which is not necessarily going to be easier than in the past. That is going to be occasionally tense, where Prime Minister Modi will clearly reassert India's national interest, or what is perceived as India's national interest, and where the two partners, India and the U.S., will have to learn how to work together. The positive thing, I think, is that there is great expectation in India and abroad that the Modi government will be perhaps more efficient than the previous government, at least for what we have seen in the past 2 years, because we should not underestimate the achievements of the UPA-1, which have led to a significant improvement of U.S.-India relations. But I mean, we're still there after 2 years difficult period, trying to resume a dialogue which has been, as I said, stalled, and that's probably what the visit will be primarily about.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think, in fact, you've already touched upon some of the questions that are coming to us, and I'm sorry. And your point that perhaps, the main thing is that the resumption of the dialogue and the way ahead on that. Now, before proceeding with some questions with yourself and a discussion, may I invite Surabhi, my colleague, to please introduce our eminent guest, Dr. Bhaskar Chakravorti, please, and so that we can get the benefit of his views also, and then we get into a Q&A. Surabhi, please.
Sure, Ravindra. Thank you. Our second speaker is the Senior Associate Dean for International Business and Finance at the Fletcher School, Tufts University, Dr. Bhaskar Chakravorti. Dr. Bhaskar is also the Executive Director of Fletcher's Institute for Business in the Global Context, that is called IBGC, and Council on Emerging Market Enterprises, CEME. Before joining Fletcher, he was a partner of McKinsey & Company and a distinguished scholar at MIT. He also serves on the faculty of the Harvard Business School. Bhaskar's book, The Slow Pace of Fast Change, Bringing Innovations to Market in a Connected World, published by Harvard Business School Press, was selected as one of the best business books of the year by multiple publications and an Amazon.com bestseller on innovation. His work has been featured at New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, Economic Times, etc. And Bhaskar's economics PhD is from the University of Rochester. He's a graduate of the Delhi School of Economics and in economics with honors from Delhi's St. Stephen's College. Ravinder?
Thank you so much, Surabhi. And once again, welcome Dr. Bhaskar Chakravorti. Sir, if you could have your views in about 4 or 5 minutes of your time on the overall landscape on the eve of the strategic dialogue between the two countries. So.
Sure. Thank you, Ravinder. It's a privilege to join this call and a privilege to join with Mr. Grare on this topic. I feel a lot of sympathy for Secretary Kerry right now. This is a man who he has been preparing for a long time for a role in international diplomacy, and this is probably not the greatest moment to be an international diplomat. As Secretary Kerry shuttles from one crisis to another, and I would think that a visit to India would be a welcome respite from some of the more challenging regions that he's been spending time on recently. Now that said, India is not entirely a respite because many of the crises that he is trying to negotiate, whether it is with respect to the crisis going on in Ukraine or in Israel and Palestine or in Iraq, and the long simmering issues to do with China and the Pacific Rim, all of them, and not to forget the U.S. withdrawal from our own neighborhood in India, in Afghanistan, all of them eventually find some kind of connection back to India. So it is a respite and at the same time a potential opportunity for Secretary Kerry to have some meaningful conversations with a potential friend. And someone had mentioned in a symposium done in Delhi that the distinction between India and Pakistan, as far as the United States is concerned, is that India is a friend but not an ally, and Pakistan is an ally but not a friend. And perhaps this could be an opportunity for the United States to make India both a friend and an ally. But I think we're at the very early stages of that conversation. I'd also recommend that Secretary Kerry should read on his long plane flights a book that I've been reading over the past week. It's called Blood Telegram, and I highly recommend all of you on the call to read it. It at least sets a benchmark for, one would say, the lowest point of India-U.S. relations in recent times. And this goes back to the 1971 war, which resulted in the creation of Bangladesh, and the absolute level of animosity that Nixon and Kissinger held for India. And we've come a long way from that point. And at least on the surface, the tone of this meeting, I would expect, will be very positive, because the U.S. to a large extent is not only in friendship building mode, it's in alliance building mode, and there is a fair amount of a gap to cover here. The United States currently does not have an ambassador in India, which is a huge issue. And we know that there's a lot of work going on in Washington, D.C. to close that. And the resignation of the United States ambassador followed on the heels of a big diplomatic crisis that Secretary Kerry also weighed in on. There has been a past sort of a troubled relationship with Narendra Modi and his earlier refusal of a visa to the United States. So Prime Minister Modi will be visiting the United States in September, and of course he will get a visa, but the memory of that earlier snub will be something that Secretary Kerry would be keen to erase. He'll certainly be keen to highlight the fact that there are very, very positive business, trade, and investment and other kinds of exchanges that the two countries can benefit from. There will be a lot of discussion about how India could make a positive move towards the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Group and potentially aspire to become a member there. So there are a number of different avenues to begin a conversation, a positive conversation on the strategic bet with India. However, underneath the surface, there are a lot of challenges, which most likely they will agree that these are issues that will have to be taken up at subsequent meetings or even behind closed doors. And several of these are thorny issues. They're not going to be easy to resolve. Certainly the recent diplomatic crisis with India is one. The issue of the Edward Snowden leaks and the recent revelation that the NSA has been spying on the BJP and other Indian institutions is a tricky topic. India's closeness to Russia is a problem, and I'm sure that is not going to be something easily resolved. India has sort of spoken from both sides of its mouth on the Israel-Palestine issue, which is also a potential challenge. And I can keep going on. And the one last point I would note is that Prime Minister Modi's maiden foreign outing was at Fortaleza, Brazil, where he agreed with 4 other leaders from the developing world to the new development bank, which to some extent is meant to be a reminder that the developing world is seeking to reorder the global economic order. And this is also something that suggests that India is looking for friendship particularly with countries such as Russia and China, and the United States would hope to try and rebalance some of that leaning that India has been signaling, at least at the early years or the early months of the Modi administration. So I'll just pause here and we can pick up on many of these topics in the Q&A.
Thank you so much, sir. I think between Mr. Grare and yourself, both of you have touched upon, I think, probably 80 or 90% of the questions that we have, which are going to come up further in this discussion, and we'll probably try to drill down a little bit on each of them. The first question, I think, probably which we'll ask Mr. Grare, Frederic, sir. You have a specialization, or you've been working a lot also in the area of, you were in Pakistan also, and security issues. Now, the question which we have here was that, what are some key issues on Afghanistan where India and the United States have a gap of perception? And can those gaps be bridged?
Well, there are obviously gaps of perception, perhaps less a gap of perception than a gap of intentions. I mean, if any of the two countries had any miracle solution for Afghanistan, that would be known by now. The fact is, for as long as the United States was present in Afghanistan, it was relatively easy for India to develop its own influence in a very cooperative and development-oriented way. I mean, this is likely to continue, but in a slightly different environment. With the U.S. gone from Afghanistan after 2016 at best, then what we will see is the risk of a proxy war re-emerging in Afghanistan for obvious reasons. So far, in the U.S. was seen largely as sort of a, how could I say, an influence preventing the development for both India and Pakistan of an excessive influence of the other. This will disappear, so the two countries will be face-to-face in their in Afghanistan, with, of course, a lot of mistrust between the two, with, of course, Pakistan in particular systematically suspecting the other of ill intentions. So this is not something which will facilitate India's life. And one of the things that India and the U.S. have disagreed upon, I mean, one of the consequences, of the U.S. drawdown from Afghanistan will the risk that at some point the regime will either erode or even collapse. I don't think that will be the case in the near future, but I mean, this is a mid-term perspective which is not totally absurd. And of course, the possibility for terrorist sanctuaries to reemerge in Afghanistan to be there. So this is where we are. And for the time being, no one has really any good solution to offer to that. India is likely to continue same kind of policy. It does train some officers for the INSF. It does support the Indian government. The Afghan government, sorry, is likely to continue to do so. It will probably continue to try its development to support development project wherever it can do so, and so on. But there is no guarantee anymore that against sanctuaries developing within Afghanistan. I think what we will see in the near future is the development of intelligence cooperation, intelligence sharing. Beyond that is difficult to assert.
Thank you so much. I think there's a footnote question to that. Of course, yes, both US and India are looking at enhancing their intelligence cooperation, and of course a lot has been done so far also. But the question which has come in as a footnote to this one was earlier, the role of Iran, and how does, I mean, let's say India's relations with Iran and this triangulation, how does that affect, or can we see some change in US views about Iran with respect to its role in Afghanistan?
Well, the change will come from something else. The change will eventually come from a nuclear agreement being signed on between Iran, the United States, Europe, and so on. We are not there yet. As you know, the negotiation has been extended by 4 months, and until we come to a settlement, then nothing of the sort is likely to happen. Now, we know full well that Iran-India relation has been an irritant for the relation between India and the United States for the past, 12 years. This is likely to continue to be so for a while. At the same time, even the United States, in a way, benefits from, to some extent, of Iranian influence in Afghanistan, because this has a stabilizing impact, at least on the west of the country. This, for India, has clearly the consequence of helping contain Pakistan's influence in Afghanistan, and so on. Can a quid pro quo be involved in that? Perhaps. India has gone a long way on the nuclear issue in playing along with the United States on the sanction and so on. It has always refused to completely sever its relation with Iran. It seems that now, if the thing go in the right direction between the U.S. and Iran, then the second, how could I say, a step could be done by the United States in accommodating India's views, which I don't think are so antagonistic. I think that the U.S. can live with India's position, and I think that for the time being, I mean, India can probably live as well with the U.S. position on Iran, sorry.
Thank you so much. I think, yeah, that's a very valid point, that the resolution of the nuclear issue with Iran would perhaps open up some fresh thinking on the role of Iran in this region. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I now have a question for Dr. Chakravorti. This is a question coming from one of our callers, Vijayendra Kumar. The question is asking, what needs to be done to increase U.S.-India trade? And then, is increasing FDI in defense industries to 49% sufficient to attract U.S. industries to participate in the manufacturing sector in India? Your views, sir.
Sure. I think it's a really important question to pose, particularly in the eve of these conversations, because as you think about the subjects that will be covered in these initial shall we say, opening dialogue, between a new Secretary of State in the United States and a new counterpart in India. The issues of politics, diplomacy, security, defense, these are sufficiently complex that we continue to have both parties sort of saying one thing and doing something else, and then saying a third thing on in a completely different forum. However, on the issue of trade and investment, it is to some extent a little more unambiguous if you think about the mutual interests for both parties. So I'm actually a lot more hopeful that in these initial conversations, the topics of bilateral trade, for one, are going to take a high priority, particularly because we have a BJP administration that is quite focused on making India a lot more business friendly and getting the country back to some paths to its old level of growth. And there have been some clear targets that people have talked about. And currently, bilateral trade between the two countries is roughly almost $100 billion, which is not huge given the sizes of the two economies. But it's good to realize that this is $100 billion today. It was about only 19 billion at the turn of the century. So we have come a long way. And there's an aspiration to grow that volume of bilateral trade to at least 5 times where we are right now. And I do think that is very feasible, quite doable, because there are a number of different ways in which the two can benefit. Most significantly, as the caller pointed out, the raising of the cap of foreign investment to 49% in some specific sectors, and most importantly, the defense sector, which has been a high priority for the BJP government. And India is one of the largest arms importers in the world, and this is certainly a big opening for the U.S. aerospace and defense industries. So I would see that as one of the early players. Relating to the question of manufacturing, I fundamentally believe that India cannot accomplish a sustained level of growth in the 8 to 10% zone unless it builds a robust manufacturing sector. Right now, we are way below where we need to be. Even for India to get to, say, Gujarat's level of manufacturing, which is roughly 25% of the Gujarat economy is manufacturing. To get India up to that level requires an enormous amount of investment in a number of other supporting sectors, such as energy, such as infrastructure, and putting in a whole lot of new institutions and reforms. And the United States can certainly help in many of those supporting ecosystem sectors as well. Some of those institutional changes will have to take place within the political systems of India. So I'm a little less hopeful of manufacturing really picking up as a result of the bilateral conversations between the United States and India. I certainly see sectors such as high-tech, IT, defense as being the nose cone that will get this going. I do believe that there are a number of open wounds that still need to be fixed. Mr. Grare alluded to the impasse right now at the World Trade Organization talks, where India has essentially refused to sign onto the agreement that had been made in Bali, and for good reason, because India is itself bound to some commitments that it has made to provide food security for its people, and the Bali agreement essentially goes against those commitments. So we will need to resolve the impasse in the World Trade Organization. There are a number of other areas where U.S. regulators are extremely upset with Indian industry. The FDA has a problem with the Indian genetics drug industry. According to some calculations by the FDA, about a fifth of the Indian genetic drug industry, about a fifth of the generic drugs are fakes, according to the FDA. We don't know how true that is, and we also don't know how much of that is actually part of the genetic drugs that are sold in the United States. But this is a huge issue that needs to be resolved. The FAA, the Aviation Authority, has problems with the Indian Airlines. So there are a number of other areas that require further productive conversation and resolution, all of which will have to be taken up, presumably in follow-on talks once this initial dialogue gets going.
Great, sir. Thank you so much. And I think there's a follow-up question to this coming from Rahul Manchanda in New York. Kind of addresses the same, or actually touches upon the same points we are talking right now. His point is that how can we encourage India to purchase more high technology defense equipment from US countries and not, or as compared to Russia, Israel, France, etc.?
I'm sorry, Ravinder, would you mind just repeating the question? It was a little distorted coming over the line.
Sure. The question is coming from Mr. Rahul Manchanda in New York. He is asking, what can the United States do so that India purchases more defense and military and high-tech goods from the United States rather than from Russia or France or Israel?
Well, I think the first thing that the United States will need to do, and I'm sure they will be doing it because we've heard a lot of sort of positive sounds from the United States aerospace and defense industry, is to bring in not only the Secretary of Commerce, who will be traveling with Secretary Kerry, but also senior executives from the U.S. High-tech and aerospace and defense industries to begin sort of follow through on these issues. And the second set of issues that they would need to do is explore how they can not only sell products into the Indian to the Indian administration, but also potentially set up shop within India, which could create jobs and then could have a number of secondary and tertiary benefits. So this is a combination of opening up not only trade but also setting up joint ventures in the country, which will have an enormous amount of benefits from the perspective of employment, skill building, technology transfer, and essentially growing indigenous industry within India. So I do think that there is a lot of potential for that. Part of the challenge here, of course, is that India has had, despite its non-aligned, its professed non-aligned status, it has historically been closer to, certainly been closer to Russia and several other countries that compete with the United States in the certainly in the defense sector. Being close to Israel on high tech, I think, is a great idea. Israel is one of the great high tech powers in the world. However, politically right now, Israel is in a very difficult spot, and India is in a very difficult spot in terms of being too close to Israel. So that is a fine line that the Indian administration will have to walk, and I suspect that that is not going to be something that's going to come up in this initial round of dialogue.
Great. Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Frederic Grare, a question which kind of you briefly touched upon, or a topic of nuclear, or let's say nuclear energy in our discussion right now. As you know, Senators Mark Warner and Cornyn, etc., have introduced a resolution in the U.S. Senate on the eve of this visit of this Cordell or Secretary Kerry's visit. In this resolution, they're asking that India should fully implement the 2008 Civil Nuclear Pact, which we know is right now in a limbo due to the civil liability bill in India. What do you think are the chances of this pact moving forward with India? And in case, if there is no progress on this cooperation, what kind of ramification do you think this could have on U.S.-India relations?
Well, I think that this is a question which is larger than just U.S.-India relation. As you know, the U.S. is not the only country trying to sell nuclear plants to India. Well, it's a bit difficult for me to answer your question for a single reason. What the nuclear deal did was basically to remove an obstacle, and quite a highly psychological and de facto political obstacle from the relationship, which has to do with the sort of nuclear apartheid that India was accusing the international community to impose on it. So that political and psychological aspect is gone now. On the more commercial side, first of all, the full implementation in practical terms is linked to several things. There is clearly the liability clause, which is unlikely to disappear very quickly, whatever progress are being made in this field. There are also other agreements to be signed on. As you know, some U.S. and some French nuclear constructor, if I may call it that way, also depend on the signing of an agreement between Japan and the U.S. that would allow some parts to be, which are being made in Japan, to be available now in India. So, you know, there are several dimensions to this nuclear deal which are not solved. Another one is, of course, the price of electricity, and a number of negotiations are not just linked to liability clause. I mean, there is a clearly directly commercial negotiation which is going on, which is far from being over. I would also add one more thing. I mean, India is looking increasingly at shale gas as an alternative to many things. For example, if the U.S. accepted to sell shale gas to India, the whole issue would be seen differently because there would be no comparison between the cost of opportunity produced then and the cost of power produced by the use of shale gas, for example, and the cost of power produced by nuclear plants. So, you know, this is an issue which is far from being over in my mind.
Very true, sir. I think, yeah, definitely is part of this nuclear energy dilemma. I think also hinges upon the Japan-India cooperation because several components are from Japanese companies like Hitachi and Toshiba. But coming to your second point, which you mentioned about shale gas, there are some discussions in the U.S. Congress about export of LNG to India. What do you think are chances of some policy hurdles being removed for exports of LNG from the U.S. to non-FTA countries? India also happens to be a non-FTA country on that count.
Well, that I'm not able to answer that. This is not a field that I know very well. The answer, in a way, is in the question. I mean, it's a non-FTA country. It has to become an FTA country. Are we any close to that? I don't think so. But this is something which will most likely be on the table. This is not something which will be this is something which will probably be discussed in the next strategic dialogue. This is not something which will be concluding in the next strategic dialogue. So this is, you know, the perspective is not nil, although I don't really know the terms of the debate in the U.S., to be totally honest. But if anything happens, that's something which will come over, let's say, in midterm, not in the very near future.
Thank you, sir. A quick question which has come up also regarding the UN Security Council reform. Prime Minister Modi has been mentioning about it a little bit recently about UNSC and India's role in the UN Security Council. Do you see any next steps on that coming up soon?
Well, I mean, again, this is almost a rhetorical question because do you see yourself any evolution of the idea of a reform of the UN Security Council? I mean, some proposal have been made three years ago, I think, which so far has not gone anywhere, and I don't think we're any closer today to a substantial reform of the UN Security Council than we were some years ago. So the reaffirmation of India's willingness to be part of the UNSC is normal, is legitimate, but I don't think we're any close to arriving at this this result than we were before the election.
Very true. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, if I may just sort of jump in there and add to
yes,
the
please.
point that
yes, sir. Yes.
I think there was a lot of discussion and potential excitement within India about the reform in the UN Security Council and the US championing a permanent seat for India. I fear that some of that environment has receded, at least for now, because India has ceased to become the economic power, ceased to be the economic power that it was even 5 years back. So I just think that India needs to come back on the radar, not just from a perspective of its economic potential, but also its potential as a geopolitical player and as a true alternative to the likes of China and Russia. And I suspect that the somewhat ambiguous overtures that the Indian government, both the previous government and the current government is making, is not going to help that, because India has interests on sort of in too many different directions. So at the very minimum, India can work on its economy and at least get back to becoming one of the future superpowers, economic superpowers, and then this issue will be back on the table. Right now, I think it's totally off the table.
Very true. Thank you for your views, sir. A question again for you, Dr. Chakravorti. It relates to, I think, the issue of retrospective taxation, which we've all kind of been hearing and seeing it through. How do you see? Okay, backing up a bit. India needs maybe around $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion for its infrastructure needs over the next 5 years, apparently. Now, in this amount, there'll be some equity and some debt. How do you see India mobilizing these funds for its infrastructure needs?
Yeah, well, it's not going to be easy. I think that was the easy thing to say. It obviously needs to be an enormous amount of work to be done in terms of tax reform within India. The Byzantine tax system, and the whole controversy relating to retrospective taxation, and having a reform that goes towards some kind of a GST system, which was alluded to in the recent budget speech by Jaitley, but there were no details. So I'm assuming that there will be increased pressure on him to release more details in terms of tax reform, but I suspect that is going to take a fair amount of time. But it will be forthcoming, and there will be simplification of the tax regime, which is at least moderately good news. In terms of kind of getting a true reform within India, one of the big challenges in India is that it is primarily a cash economy, and it's primarily an informal sector driven economy, which basically means that large parts of the economic activity of India flies under the tax radar. So the collection of taxes domestically is just a very leaky system. So at the very minimum, there needs to be some measures to try and fix some of those leaks, and perhaps going from cash to more electronically traceable transactions, building up the formal sector. These are all areas where we could get more revenue into the Indian treasury, which would take us some of the distance. Now, at the same time, the budget speech has also made some commitments in terms of reducing the deficit and holding the line on the deficit. I just fear that the Indian government is walking a very fine line. It does not have a very clear path to holding the line on the deficit, and there are far too many uncertainties right now in the world, not the least of which the uncertainties in the Middle East, which could, if there is a perfect storm in the Middle East, there already is, close to a perfect storm. We could see a spike in oil prices, and all the assumptions that have been made by practically every economist leading up to the current budget and the forecast for India could go out the window. So I think there are a number of small levers that the Indian government can pull, but it doesn't really have a huge amount of control to deal with the huge amount of institutional change and external uncertainties that will ultimately affect its ability to raise the kind of revenues it needs to truly build infrastructure and make the other long-term deep investments that the country needs.
Thank you, sir. A quick question, a follow-up question on that actually, and this is something on which USINPAC has also been working. We've been having some meetings with the Indian government officials here and some senior officials about potential, infrastructure bonds which are aimed at the Indian diaspora globally. The perspective being that the diaspora globally is generally quite enthusiastic about the developments in India and is looking forward to a rejuvenation and a fresh growth in the country. Now, some senior officials find that a positive thing. They think that, yes, there can be some bonds which can be issued for the diaspora wherein investments or basically debt could come in. But the flip side that they're debating is that if India issues such bonds in the international market, will it lead to an image of India that India is out there looking for funds, and it will kind of, somewhat play negatively towards India's image, if you understand what I'm trying to say, sir? What would be your remarks on that?
Yeah, I think it does not require a huge amount of imagination for the rest of the world to realize that India needs an enormous amount of investment in infrastructure, and that investment has not been forthcoming. So I think the diaspora bonds that you were alluding to, and other forms of institutions that could help bring in investments into Indian infrastructure, I think are all positive moves from my perspective. I wouldn't worry too much about any kind of a reputational impact. Most people who have all they need to do is travel to India for simply one day, and you realize, where perhaps one of the weakest spots for the Indian environment is. Any move that signals that India is serious about fixing its infrastructure problem is going to be taken to be a positive signal.
Great. Thank you so much. A question for Mr. Frederic Grare. Sir, India's had a look east policy for quite some time, which has been slowly developing. But with this new Prime Minister, the expectation is that India's relations with countries like Japan and Korea would perhaps move more aggressively and at a faster pace. How do you see this playing out in terms of overall geopolitical relations between the US and India's, if not a tilt, but a look east or a closer look to the east? What are your views on that, sir? This is a question which has come in from Chicago, please.
Well, I'm not sure it's the right way to look at these things. The problem of India's look east policy and its lack of development is not primarily a lack of aggressivity of, let's say, the Indian state or the Indian companies. It's the structure of the Indian economy per se. So in many ways, this is primarily a domestic problem. And as the Indian economy will become more and more open, then naturally the link with the East Asian countries, the Southeast Asian countries, will develop as well. And this economic integration will depend on a large measure of India's own domestic reform. Now, on the geopolitical side, I think we shouldn't confuse everything. I mean, we clearly see relationship developing between Japan and India. And I don't see, for the time being at least, qualitative difference between the policy followed up by Mr. Manmohan Singh and Mr. Narendra Modi both want strong ties with Japan. For obvious reasons, what isn't clear yet is the way they will manage not so much the U.S. factor into this, but the Chinese factor. I mean, India has always wanted an inclusive regional integration that will also take China into account. Japan has moved in a direction which, for obvious reasons, makes it more willing to have a relationship which looks more like a balancing or counterbalancing of China than anything else. And some sort of compromise will have to be evolved there. I don't see we're in for any dramatic evolution. If things take place, they will indeed take place. They will take place gradually. Let's see the extent to which Japan, for example, will invest in India's infrastructure. This could be a game changer over time, but only over time, and this comes in the continuation of policy which has been initiated before. This is, if it can be sped up, if it could be made more efficient, that's good news, and so on. This will have an impact over time. But I mean, this is not something which will come overnight, and we will not see a dramatic change in the balance of power in Asia simply due to this rapprochement, which personally I welcome anyway. As for the U.S., well, the U.S. is likely to welcome those developments. I mean, a stronger India in the whole region is all benefit from the U.S. I mean, I think the promoters, for example, I'm clearly referring to one of my dear colleague Ashley Tellis here, who advocated strongly in favor of the nuclear deal, had as a basic argument, which is very true, that a stronger India is in the benefit of the United States by itself, irrespective of the evolution of the bilateral relationship between the two otherwise. So, you know, a stronger India in Asia is something positive for the U.S. It may not necessarily take the form that the U.S. always wants. It will retain some form of autonomy no matter what. And let's see how things move in that direction. I don't see there a dramatic evolution, perhaps a more efficient way of doing things, but definitely not a revolution.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Another question, I think, again, on a perspective, I think we've already touched upon it with both of our speakers, but I need to take it up because it's just come to me on chat. The question is asking that with India's stance at the WTO yesterday and today regarding the trade facilitation agreement, how do you think it could affect the strategic dialogue between the U.S. and India, which is beginning next week? I think we've already talked about it, but if you could again throw some light on that, sir.
Again, it's difficult to say how it's likely to affect the strategic dialogue. I mean, this is definitely no good news for not just the U.S., but the rest of the international community, that 33 countries decided to not to sign on the Bali Agreement. How is it likely to evolve? I don't know, simply because what the Indian delegation has asked is not simply that the agreement be thrown away, but a postponement until the end of the year. So this is something which is an irritant in the relation. Let's see how it evolves. Let's see if a compromise can be found. Part of the problem is also that India seems to be coming back on his words, because this question of food security was supposed to be put on a separate dialogue, and India seems to come back on this. Let's see how it evolves, and I'm reasonably optimistic, or at least I hope so, that a compromise will be found. But definitely it will be in the written in the coming months. Is it likely to affect the dialogue per se? I'm not sure. I'm pretty convinced that the need to prepare the dialogue between President Obama and Prime Minister Modi will certainly prevail.
Great. So
yeah, I also just to kind of add to that, I would say that the impasse of the WTO and several others that we have alluded to, which are some of the thorny issues, I suspect they will, while they'll be raised in the discussion, it's highly unlikely that there will be a huge amount of progress or digging into it, because I would think that Secretary Kerry's primary priority right now will be to build bridges. It is enormously awkward for the United States to go into any of these thorny areas without an ambassador in New Delhi. And so, they will potentially put this on the parking lot, and there will possibly be follow-on meetings, but I highly doubt that this is going to be a major topic of discussion.
Very true, sir. Definitely. I mean, having an ambassador on the ground is something I think all of us are looking towards, and somebody who has, who also is seen to have political clout back home in Washington, so that the administration here in India also engages proactively. That's something which is definitely very much needed. It brings me to another question to you, sir, Dr. Chakravorti. This is a little bit of a specific question. The resolution introduced by Senators Mark Warner and Cornyn regarding the strategic dialogue has also mentioned to the Obama administration that it should urge India to modify its offset regime, the defense offsets, so that the funds can flow into a second tier of Indian priorities such as education, skills development, or manufacturing. What do you think are chances of this if the U.S. brings it up in a discussion in the dialogue next week? How do you think India would react or look at it?
I'm afraid I don't have enough insight to be able to comment on that. I do think, I don't have any particular knowledge of that topic.
Fair enough, sir. Mr. Frederic Grare, would you care to have some comment on that? The fact that the U.S. might be proposing that the offsets, which normally are aimed at manufacturing within the defense sectors, should also include skill development, education, and such other aspects of Indian sectors?
I find, well, I've read the proposal, and I think it's a very interesting one, many account, because it says that on one side that, well, defense relation, industrial defense cooperation between the two countries shouldn't be impeded by the offset question. But it also recognized de facto the limitation of the existing defense industry sector in India, because if it is not capable of absorbing all the offset that it's requiring, which is the reason why Senator Warner has introduced this clause in the bill, then there is somehow a problem. And it simply says what? It simply signals the goodwill of the United States. The offset will no longer or should no longer be an impediment between the two. It also signals somehow that the progress in the defense industrial cooperation will perhaps be slower than a lot of people would like to. And this is not something unreasonable. So that's the way I understand it, and that's the remark I'd like to submit to you.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we are almost running close to our finishing time, but we have one quick question and then maybe closing comments from both of you, sirs. One last question to Dr. Chakravorti is that our last speaker, or in the previous session, Mr. Ravi Venkatesan, the former chairman of Microsoft, has written a book where he says that companies need to look at a long-term plan when they look to enter into the Indian market, or they might as well not enter the Indian market. Do you think this new government steps now are increasing the appetite for foreign corporations to enter India for the long term?
Who is the question for?
I'm sorry?
Who is the question for?
This is for Dr. Chakravorti, please.
Okay.
Yeah, I certainly think that the current government has the potential to make the Indian environment a lot more attractive for U.S. and other international companies to come in. Partly because that was the platform on which Narendra Modi ran, which is to make the country a lot more business friendly, potentially simplifying many of the regulatory and tax systems, and doing what is needed to bring the economy back to a level of growth that it had enjoyed in the early part of this century. Certainly raising the caps on foreign ownership in certain sectors is a good signal. In fact, I would say that the budget speech of Arun Jaitley signals a number of positive changes that the government is willing to make. He didn't go into a whole lot of detail on many issues, and I don't believe he should, simply because the government is too new. And I think this exercise of looking at a single budget speech as a single event in which you solve the intergalactic problems of the economy, I think it's much more important to see his speech as a signal of what's to come. And all the signals that he gave seem to be very positive from the perspective of multinational or U.S. industry. Now, the comment about any entrant into India having to think long-term, I think that is absolutely true, perhaps more true for India than for virtually any other major emerging market, largely because for any company to be able to sustain a long-term business in India, it needs to develop a whole set of business practices, both upstream and downstream, which requires a lot of long-term investment and long-term thinking. And by that I mean it needs to figure out how it is going to manage a supply chain in India in a part of a world where the supply chain is weak. So how does it invest in building a supply chain? How does it invest in technology transfer? How does it create an entire network of local entrepreneurs and local firms that are suppliers? And simultaneously think about the downstream end and how does it actually distribute to the Indian consumer, most of whom are residing in very difficult to reach places. And not only solving the distribution problem and the supply chain problem, but also solving the product problem, which is how does it create products for the Indian consumer, which is going to be one of the largest and hungriest middle class anywhere in the world. How does it produce products that are suitable for Indian conditions, that are affordable for the Indian middle class? All of this requires an enormous amount of long-term thinking. And so without that, any company that is planning to play in India for a while is going to fail.
Thank you so much, sir. I think we could hear the professor in you speaking and giving a very lucid view or an answer to that question. Thank you, sir. Mr. Frederic Grare, would you care to please comment on that or any closing comments? Because now we are one closing comment or thought from you or a couple of minutes or a minute, and then with Dr. Chakravorti, and then we'll be closing this discussion. Any thoughts, sir, on any of the topics that we've touched upon or maybe not touched upon, though the questions are still coming in, but we are running out of time, sir. So any thoughts?
No, well, no particular comments on any of the things which have been said. I mean, a lot of these have already been said. I think it would be wise to remember that Mr. Modi has been elected by the Indian electorate, and he has been elected with a strong mandate to pursue Indian national interests. And those interests will sometimes converge with the interests of other countries, in particular the U.S., but not systematically. And once you have accepted this idea that you're not elected by, he was not elected by U.S. multinational, then you see the path that's going to have to be taken. And this is going to be sometimes probably an occasionally irritant one and complicated one. At the same time, we all know that Mr. Modi is known for his pragmatism. The image that he has tried to project is the CEO of Gujarat, which is probably a good thing. And the relation might be at the same time difficult, but end up being at the end of the period perhaps more solid. As for India being, so, you know, the recommendation that foreign companies willing to invest in India should take a long-term view, this is very true. As for countries willing to invest in India, they should also take a long-term view and not forget the premises of any international relation and government, which is precisely that government are elected by their constituency and not by foreign countries to please them. This doesn't mean the relation will be bad. Conversion of interest exists. Conversion of interest will be developed, and that's all they'll in a better way than they were in the past. But nevertheless, this remains the basic reality.
Brilliant, sir. Thank you so much. Dr. Chakravorti, would you have some closing comments before I hand it over to Surabhi, my colleague, and she has some information she would like to share with you and our callers on our initiative regarding LNG gas on Capitol Hill. But before that, Dr. Chakravorti, any closing thoughts, sir, please? I think it's been a wonderful discussion so far, and I've got several more questions with us, but we are running short on time now.
Well, let me just keep it short, and I'll piggyback on the comments that Mr. Grare made, which I completely agree with, and what you just mentioned, Ravinder, which is that Mr. Modi has been elected by the Indian electorate for the purposes of what is best for India. And if you use that lens, and if you look at, and here is where I'm going to go into a little bit of a professorial mode, which is you think about the three major disciplines that are mixed up here. One is politics, the second is business / economics, and the third is history. Politics and history, as far as Indian-US relations are concerned, is always going to be a mixed bag. It's always going to be complicated. Both parties are always going to be speaking out of both sides of their mouth at the same time. No matter how many times people say that, you know, India is a strategic alternative to China and this and that, we're always going to be in the situation where India is going to selectively be friendly with the United States on some issues and completely unfriendly and go head-to-head against it in some others. And there's no way around it. On the business / economic front, there may actually be a clearer direction. Not a completely clear direction, but a clearer direction. And to the extent that it doesn't collide against the politics, I do see a huge path forward because there's a tremendous amount of mutual benefit for U.S. industry and the Indian, not just the industry, but the young population of India that actually does look to the United States in many ways as kind of the kind of future that it wants to have for itself. History is something that you know, ultimately, if we ignore history, then we'll be condemned to repeat it. And the history between the United States and India is a very, very complex one, and no one is going to be able to overcome that. And in order to remind ourselves of that history, I recommend everybody go back and buy a copy of the Blood Telegram and read it.
Great, sir. Fantastic. I think it's been a fantastic discussion, and we definitely would. I think we'll suggest to as many people as we can to look deeper into history and pick up the Blood Telegram. And with that, once again, I thank you, sirs, Mr. Frederic Grare, Dr. Bhaskar Chakravorti. It's been a fantastic discussion. I think our callers and listeners would have definitely benefited and learned something. We all keep on learning always. And with those words, I hand it over to my colleague, Surabhi. Surabhi, over to you, please.
Thank you, Ravinder. As you said, I would like to talk about one of the events which we are organizing on the Hill next week. It's a congressional briefing on U.S. liquefied natural gas, LNG exports to India. And it's an initiative which USINPAC has been pursuing to work with U.S. lawmakers to influence U.S. policy on expediting LNG exports to India and thus help foster a long-term collaboration in LNG trade between the two countries. As we know, expedited exports of LNG from the U.S. could help set the stage for stronger trade relationships with India. And we have been working very hard on the Capitol Hill in endorsing U.S. LNG export to India. It will create jobs here. It will be strengthening the U.S.-India bilateral relationship in terms of trade. So this congressional briefing on U.S. liquefied natural gas LNG exports to India is on the Hill. The location is U.S. Capitol Visitor Center, room number CVC 217. That is Capitol Visitor Center, room number CVC 217. And it's on July 30th, Wednesday. And it's between 1:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. We have several congressmen coming. They are confirmed to attend this briefing as speakers, like Congressman Ted Poe, Pete Olson, and many others. And the purpose of the briefing, as I said, is to inform officers and offices of lawmakers and thought leaders about the tremendous potential of U.S. LNG export, the nature and scope of the LNG import market in India, and how LNG can advance energy security, etc. The agenda of the briefing will focus on the following key points: significance of India as a trade partner of the U.S. in LNG export, the Department of Energy FERC licensing process for approval of U.S. LNG exports, potential for legislative action to expedite this trade. Again, it's this Wednesday, July 30th, 1:30 p.m. to 4 p.m., Capitol Visitor Center room, CVC 217. With that, Rabinder, let's thank the entire audience, audio callers, webinar joinees, our great speakers, and our team of volunteers, and many other people who have supported this program and helped us make it run so far as a very unique program, the longest running webinar in US. Thank you for joining the session today. Please join us again on August 9, Saturday, same time, same login details. The topic of the discussion will be sent to you all soon. Have a good rest of the weekend. Thank you.
Goodbye.